Hey folks, it's Matt here with Basemap, and today we're talking the Montana Draw and the things you need to know to be prepared for the application this year. Okay, the first are deadlines. There's 3 deadlines in Montana. They happen on the 1st of April, the 1st of May, and the 1st of June. Always at 11:45 p.m. Mountain Time. Now, what species are linked to each of those deadlines? Well, that first deadline in April is for deer and elk A tags. Those are typically your male or either sex hunts, and also for non-resident deer and elk licenses, general deer and elk licenses, that is. The second deadline is for moose, sheep, goat, and bison. And the last deadline is for deer and elk B tags, which are typically your, either cow or doe tags, and antelope licenses. Now, if you want to purchase bonus points or preference points outside of any of these deadlines, you can between July 1st and September 30th of the license year. Okay, let's jump into limited draws. Now, the first thing you need to know is there are general codes in Montana, and as a resident, you can just purchase a general deer or elk license over the counter. There are no general licenses for other species. If you're a non-resident and you'd like to hunt deer or elk in Montana, you will need to draw one of these general licenses. There's a separate drawing for a general non-resident deer or elk license, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but know that you first must have one of those general licenses before you can apply for a specific limited permit in Montana for deer or elk. Now, if we're talking about other species, those are all going to be under these limited permit codes. Okay, so what about these limited permits? Well, if you're looking at the regulation book, you're going to see that there's a quota attached to each of these limited permits. Now, these limited permits typically, or licenses, depending on the species, typically define a set of hunting districts or a single hunting district, a weapon or weapons and dates that you can hunt that species, and the sex that you can harvest. The cool thing about Montana is a lot of them allow for multiple weapons to be used during different times of the year. So that's cool if you want to extend your seasons. The quota now for that limited draw will restrict the number of hunters in the field at the same time as you. And that quota will be allocated among applicants according to a couple different draw systems, which we're going to get into in a second. But the first thing you need to know about that quota is that it is apportioned to different applicant types. Now, the way it's broken up, or the way the rules are written, is that 90% of that quota or more can go to residents. So residents could draw 100%, but they are guaranteed at least 90% of that quota. And then non-residents can draw the remainder. There's one sneaky little thing that can happen, which is that if you're a qualifying landowner, you could pull some off the top of that quota. So if there were, let's say, 100 tags, for instance, for a particular limited draw, and there were 10 landowners applying, they could pull 10 off the top and there would only be 90 left. Okay, so now why do I say that residents are guaranteed up to 90%? Well, it's because the way the rules are written, they can actually draw, let's say, 95 or 100, and it all depends on the way that the actual drawing ends up shaking out. So the way the Montana draw works is that applicants are assigned random numbers, and those applicants are ranked from lowest random number to highest, and we work our way down the list giving out licenses. If it just so happens that residents all have the lowest random numbers and 100% of the tags go to them, that's perfectly okay. So that's why I say residents are guaranteed at least 90, but it could be more. Now let's talk about the actual draw system in getting those random numbers. Well, there's 3 draw systems in Montana. The majority of draws use a bonus point system. In fact, unless it's either a bison hunt, which uses a random draw, or one of those non-resident general deer or elk tags, which uses a preference point system, all other draws are going to use this bonus point system. In Montana, they actually square your bonus points. So how does this all work? Well, every year you're unsuccessful, or every year you decide to purchase a point, you will gain a point, right? So gain a point being unsuccessful or purchasing one. And then the next year that you apply, that point or points will be squared. They'll give you more entries into the drawing. So if I have, let's say, 3 points going into this year's drawing, those 3 points will be squared, in which case I'll get 9 entries, plus I'll get an additional entry for this year. So I'll have 10 entries total. Each of those entries will be assigned a random number, and my lowest random number from those 10 will be used to rank me in that list against other applicants. So that's the way the bonus point system works. The cool thing is, the more you have, the better your odds. And also, even if you don't have any points going into the drawing, you still have a chance. Unlike the non-resident general deer or elk, where 75% of the draw is using a preference point system. Now, a preference point system, the way that it works is it ranks applicants with the most preference points at the top, down to those with the least at the bottom. And that quota, that 75% of the quota that's given out in the preference point system, will be given to those at the top, and we'll work our way down until we run out of quota. But the twist here is that for non-residents, there's still 25% of the quota that remains for these deer and elk tags. And that 25% is actually given out to people who have no points. So what happens is the 0 point applicants at the bottom, they're randomly given out 25% of the tags. And so it's actually a strategy in Montana to decide not to build preference points or not use your points in that year's application and go into that 0 point group, because it has happened in the past where you're better off having no preference points. You'll have a, let's say, higher odds of drawing than if you only had 1 preference point. Okay. The last thing you need to know about our choices when you go to actually fill out your application in Montana, you can choose up to 3 hunts. That first choice that you choose, we're going to use one of those draw systems, either that preference point system, the random, or the bonus point system in most of the cases, to allocate licenses. If there are any licenses left over for a particular hunt, after we go through every first choice applicant, then we'll consider people who selected that hunt as their second choice. Lots of times all of the quota has been given out, but if there's still some left over, we'll randomly give out the remaining licenses to the second choice. And if there's still some quota left over, we'll go to the third. All right, those are the key things you need to know for Montana to apply this year. Good luck.